Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I thought I would reflect on my daily tarot journaling practice and just share a bit of that with you all. It's something that I have considered sharing, debated, and to some degree felt like it was too personal, but at the same time I have some entries that aren't so personal, so I thought I would just investigate the idea of tarot journaling and writing down things related to tarot, as I know that that's, I wouldn't say a hot topic, but everybody has their own views and opinions on it. Some believe that that is a great and necessary way to go about learning and keeping a tarot practice. Some people do not do so and aren't really interested in writing anything down at all. And I'm personally somebody who has fluctuated between being almost vehemently against tarot journaling and writing things down, and now I'm more in the camp of doing so myself and writing things down. And I guess I will go into my journey or transition through those phases. So I began doing tarot about 5 years ago now. So at the start of college, I'm now a year out of college. So yeah, about 5 years. And for the first 3 or 4, I was pretty much not writing down almost anything. I actually went to school for English literature, and so a lot of my schoolwork, my schooling involved writing, and I guess after all of the schoolwork and some personal projects, I did not feel inclined at all to write for my tarot related things. To me, that was just something that was so personal and fun and something I would just do on my off time. So I had no inclination to write just because I was writing so much, I think, for school, and I had certain personal projects, but they felt more almost professional and things that I was undertaking in terms of my education or in lieu of my education to some degree. So I had no interest in journaling about tarot, and I had read, actually I was not at all on YouTube for the better part of the first 3 to 4 years of my tarot journey. I had never watched a video on tarot, but most of the books that I'd read did talk about keeping a journaling practice, which I just tossed to the side and ignored. I had no desire, and to me that seemed like a big chore, and so I just didn't do it. And I know that there are many out there who have no interest in writing things down, and I can resonate and relate. But this video is about me having kind of moved out of that phase, and it's not to at all frown upon those who don't write things down. I think that neither is better or worse, and I don't write down all of my tarot readings by any means. I would say that my consistent daily practice is that I have a very regimented daily practice in recording my daily draw and going about things. I'm gonna take you guys over to my tarot table and go through what it is that I do. I have 3 examples to show, but I will pull a card from the Thoth. The past few months it's been a Thoth, and I would say for basically the entire time I've been doing this regimented practice, I've been using the Thoth deck. So I will pull a card from here. I will then write it down with the date, and I will read an excerpt from this book, so the excerpt of the card in this book. And the majors have about 4 pages worth of information. The minors all have 1 page, and then the courts have 2. So this would be like the extent of the 2 of Wands. And you get a lot going here. There are quotes from Crowley, there are quotes from various works and writings. You get things like meanings in terms of professional life, of relationships, general, energetic. You get astrological correspondences, tree of life, I Ching, analogies, images, keywords. You get a lot for the majors. You get things like runes, rituals, times of year, sacred sites that are connected, writings from classical authors and musical works, fragrances. You get archetypes. They go into the Hebrew letters of the majors. You get things like consciousness. You get all sorts of things, and in the majors they break down the actual elements of the symbolism. So I find this to be a really great way, if you're actually into Thoth at all, this I think is a great book for reference. It's a great book to use to break down those certain things and to look for inspiration in various elements of the outside world in terms of a card. So I will read the excerpt from this book. I will then read Crowley's excerpt from the Book of Thoth on any given card. So those can vary in length. I would say a lot of the minors tend to only have about a paragraph in a divinatory excerpt, whereas the majors sometimes will have a few pages. Courts will usually have maybe a larger paragraph, sometimes as much as a page, but generally no more than that. Crowley didn't really think that divination was the primary use, or he didn't intend for the Thoth Tarot to be used for divination as its primary purpose. So the excerpts are not necessarily very divinatory centered to be used in such a way, but I find it really interesting nonetheless. I want to investigate the cards. It's more than just me pulling a card to analyze my day, myself, what's to come, and to reflect. It's really about understanding the archetype and how I can work with that during that day. There might be a divinatory element as well, but I don't want to restrict it to just that. Likewise with my tarot journal, I would say that I have gotten better about recording larger readings that I do. I would say I conduct larger readings for myself a little bit more scarcely, maybe once a week, so I will then write out the positions. I enjoy designing spreads for myself, and so I will write out or draw out the spread. I've shared some of these with you all in the form of tutorials and various Instagram posts where I will share spreads that I've come up with, and those are usually ones that I will have recorded in this journal, recorded my own results, that is. So I find this to be particularly useful in the progression of my tarot studies and broadening my perspectives and integrated meanings of the cards within myself. Just because when I am, say, conducting a reading for a client or for myself, I'm drawing upon this vast wellspring of knowledge of all of the accumulated sort of readings and experiential knowledge that I have acquired on the various cards, along with, of course, my intuition, the connection that I have with the client or myself, the circumstances, etc. But it's always nice to sort of beef up that database that we have within ourselves where cards are concerned, and when we're writing, we're reinforcing whatever thoughts, feelings, and actual readings we are intaking. We're kind of it's a reinforcement. It's a mental reinforcement, and it also gives us this sort of, maybe not incentive, but it pushes us, I would say it pushes me at least, to go further than what is going on inside my head. So I may have thoughts, but as soon as I start writing, a new thought appears that wouldn't have happened if I didn't take the pen to paper, and then I run with that thought. And I actually make a big effort to write about things that seem a little bit offbeat when I am taking notes or doing my daily journal practice on a given card, and we're going to get into that. So without further ado, I'm going to take us to my tarot table, which is right over here, so that way you guys can see my journal more clearly, and I'm just going to go through 3 daily examples that I feel like are a little bit more interesting and also not as personal, just because, yeah, some of them do get very personal, but there are many days where I feel like I'm investigating a strange thread of thought that I connect to the card that day, or an emotion. So we're going to head over and look at those, and hopefully this can give anybody watching some inspiration for their own potential daily journaling practices if you're looking to start one, or you're just curious about mine and how somebody else goes about doing it. I just thought I would share. So we're going to head over there now. Hi everyone, so we're over at my tarot table with an example of a daily writing in my journal. Now there is a sort of structure or regimen that I go about using that I find helps me to keep in practice, to not fall off the wagon, and I've designed it to be really realistic and helpful for myself, but also really interesting and something that feels juicy and fun. So I will start by writing the date up here at the top, then I will write what the card of the day was. Now before I continue my writing, I will read the excerpt on the given card in both of these books. Then I start my actual writing process. Now I've started to fall into the practice of writing on the fronts of 2 pages. So basically this length has been one that I've been using about, or traditionally sticking to, for the past few weeks. There are days when I will write more than this, but this I would say is the way that I generally like to do it, and sometimes I will go beyond that. It's usually not shorter than this though. So the next phase is to write keywords. Now the keywords I write are not taken from the books. I actually like to throw the books aside after I've read them, and I will not use them to do the rest of this aside from the quote. So these are keywords that pop into my head, and they're not necessarily drawn from anywhere but within me. So I could pull the Fool 2 days in a row and have completely different keywords. It's how it feels that day. I'm sure that the actual excerpts will influence it, and what stood out in my head is probably going to affect what the keywords are, but it's also a reflection of how I'm feeling about that card on the given day. So for the Fool this day, I had keywords like creation, unfathomable, nonsensical, carefree, unbothered, free, uninhibited, beginning, ending, cycles, wisdom, mystic, insight. Apologies for any typos and grammatical errors. I usually will write these very early in the morning. I don't take the time to proofread them, and it's personal, so I'm not so concerned with it being completely correct. But those were the keywords that felt really important, apparently, to me on June 12th when I pulled the Fool. So that's the first thing I do. Now, after I've done that part, I will return to the book, specifically just the Book of Thoth, and I will pick one sentence, just one sentence from the Book of Thoth on the card that stands out to me the most. The sentence that feels like it is calling to me, that was hanging in my head basically as I was writing these keywords, or when I was reading it, that particularly stood out in terms of the card that day. So I could pull the Fool again 2 days in a row and have a different quote. I might choose the same quote. It just really depends on what feels right. So for this day we have, it is characteristic of all high spiritual vision that the formulation of any idea is immediately destroyed or canceled out by the arising of the contradiction. And then I cite it with Crowley on page 63 of the Book of Thoth so that I can easily find it. And so the next part is really where things get creative, and this would be where I sort of just go off on a tangent. Now, the writing that follows after the quote is generally inspired by the quote, but sometimes it can take on a life of its own and feel completely disconnected from the quote. This one's pretty connected to the quote, I would say, so I'll take us through it. We have the opposing duality of all that exists, of all that exists means that the creation of any one thing is really two things. These two can render each other useless or neutral because of their opposition. The only unopposed thing can be what is not yet created. And then the last little bit, silence means nothing without sound, light means nothing without darkness. Contrast and comparison are essential and inextricable from existence. So I guess the idea of the Fool being this impetus or crux of creation and an emanation from something that is sort of unfathomable, and that the creation of any one thing automatically sort of creates its opposition or its opposing point. So that opposing point or that opposition that is created when a thing itself is created can cancel each other out. And so to create something is also to destroy it, and that the really anything that is created is almost destroying itself in this sort of, I don't know, esoteric, magical, spiritual sense. So I was really just playing with the idea of duality and opposites and creation here. So to me that seemed really important on the day, and usually I will reflect on this at the end of the day and also go throughout the day kind of looking for examples of this. I keep it in mind, and it's something that I will reference mentally as the day progresses. Sorry, I just kicked the camera thing. But we will get on to the next example, which would be... The next one is from June 14th of 2020. The card of the day was the Four of Discs, or the Four of Pentacles if you're reading with the Rider-Waite-Smith. And so I read my books, and then I wrote my keywords, which were power, sustenance, balance, fortitude. I guess I wrote sustenance twice, and I spelled it different in both instances, so that's interesting. Early morning James's mind is as an enigma. Acquisition, stability, rigidity, material entrapment. So that's how I was feeling. The quote I chose was, "Sound so made suggests the other throat. One is the channel of respiration and nutrition, the other of reproduction and elimination." Crowley 2:14. So Crowley was speaking on the idea of using one's voice, or the emanation of the voice from the throat, looking at it in terms of there being two very distinct types of voices. One that is the one that we breathe through, that is natural, that we generally hear, and then one that is a lot more visceral and guttural. And to me, that sort of opposition, or the two various voices and what they connote, was something that really stuck out to me in terms of the Four of Discs as this powerful, earthy, almost stable and stocky sort of card. So I then wrote, Crowley associates the Four of Discs with queenhood. So he associates it, with the idea of the femininity and a sort of royal queen, which he then associates with guttural sounds. There is a very different physical sensation when one makes a guttural sound. It does feel like another throat, not one that is used to eat and breathe. It feels primal and old. It feels powerful and violent and more substantial, like the idea of making sound more material or tangible. There is a power in a guttural sound that other sounds cannot achieve. It is not about what is said, but how one says it. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. So to me, the idea of there being this really, really deep sound that one can create, and the sort of feelings and power that it holds, and that being very far removed from, say, my speaking voice, or a voice that I would use, or the breath that I would use in my normal daily life. So it does feel somewhat more earthy or tangible to utter a noise that sounds so deep and guttural. So for me, the Four of Discs was really connected to the idea of making one's voice or sound or being more tangible and solid and powerful through sound in that day. And then the final example that I will show is from today. And today I pulled the Star. I love this card in this deck. It's beautiful. And so the keywords I wrote down were renewal, hope, inspiration, love, youthful, plan, fruition, actualization, beauty, peace, placidity. And the quote I wrote was, it gives the definitive formula for the attainment of truth. Crowley 111. So I actually am now thinking about this because it's so fresh in my mind from today, and there are times when I will say take almost quotes out of context, meaning basically that I want to take the actual sentence for how it feels to me. So this was actually a preface to a quote that he was about to say, but I chose to take it in terms of meaning, of a meaning tied to his ideas of the star. So although I don't recommend ever really taking any sort of writing or voice taking it into context, this would be one instance when I give myself the freedom of taking something out of context to see where my mind takes me. So what I had to say about this was, truth is beauty. It is pure and free from illusion. However, truth is subjective in its manifestation, and so this beauty can only exist uniquely within oneself. Objective truth exists in theory, hypothetically. The attainment of objective objective truth is impossible, just as objective beauty is impossible to formulate. I guess there is much wisdom in the old adage that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There is something reassuring about the inextricability of personal and subjective truth. It is always with you, and it can never be taken. It is created by you and invincible within you. So the idea that a formula for the attainment of truth made me think about ideas of beauty that I associate sometimes with the star, especially this depiction. And so the idea of truth being something that is fluid, it's more conceptual and can be thought of in that way much more than it can be in actuality. We think of there being multiple sides to the truth and that there is this objective truth, but that the actual attainment of and knowing of the entire objective truth is something that's debatably impossible. And so I decided to investigate the idea of things that are really only possible in a mental capacity, or as a sort of like in a hypothetical sense. So the idea of the thing is really what we know, but we cannot ever experience it or have it for ourselves. And so to me, I find ideas and concepts that are that can only exist as thoughts and concepts to be very interesting, but that we do interact with on a daily basis, but that we can never really quite have. So this is really just a rundown of how I might go about journaling each day and a peek into my journal specifically. I would love to know what it is that you all do in terms of journaling with tarot, if you have a daily journaling practice or a daily draw sort of practice, and how that works for you. I hope that this was helpful and that there was something to be gained from taking a peek into my journal. I hope I wasn't just rambling into the void, as I do feel like I am sometimes, but I hope you are all well. Feel free to leave anything down below. That I'm open to suggestions, and I love to hear personal anecdotes and things from your personal practices out there. So bye everyone.